Hi, welcome in, welcome in.
Dear TikTok algorithm.
Welcome in. Hi. Welcome in. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome in, welcome in. I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're going to just shop and talk mental health tonight. Hi, my name is Jamie. I am a full-time writer that used to be a licensed addiction counselor. I like to talk about all things mental health, addiction, and social justice. I also love to shop and do beauty products. And so I do have some beauty products pinned in the shopping cart below. Today I normally do a live on Sunday night about mental health, but I was feeling called to go ahead and do a live tonight on mental health. And so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Anybody's welcome to participate. If you want to come up on a panel, just request and just send me a request and I'll add you to the panel and we can talk this out. I'm more than happy to discuss all things mental health. And then I'm going to discuss some of the products in the cart at some point as well too. We'll go ahead and get started. I do have this slotted for 30 minutes, but if we're having a good time, which I hope we do, we will go for longer. So hi, my name is Jamie. I am so glad that you're here because I'm going to dive into a topic that affects more people than we realize, and that is mental health stigma. Oh my God, 68 people in the room. This is incredible. I hope you guys all stick around. Like I said, if you want to come up and talk while we discuss mental health, please send me a request and I will add you to the panel. Before we jump in, I want to warm up everybody in the chat. So drop one word in the comments, just one word that comes to mind when you hear the phrase mental health. What is one word that comes to mind when you hear the phrase mental health? Let me know. And then if you guys don't want to participate, but you want to hang out, please tap away at that screen. Tap away at this live for me. Please, please, please. All right. Thank you so much for tapping out that live. One word that would describe mental health. Holy goodness. We got so many people in here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Does anybody have one word that they would use to describe mental health? Thank you so much for hopping in the live. I see somebody is tapping away. So when I hear the phrase mental health, I like to think overall wellness, not just about the mental health aspect of things, right? I like to think about overall health and wellness because mental health and physical health go hand in hand. If you don't have one, it's really hard to have the other. Thank you so much for the follow, Matthew. I appreciate that. I hope you hang out and chat with us here. Okay, so we're going to talk about stigma. Stigma is huge when it comes to mental health. Stigma is basically judgment, shame, or stereotypes that surround mental health, right? So things like this person's crazy or that person's crazy, stuff like that, can sometimes be considered stigma. Stigma is also making people feel shame, even though they are struggling with something, or maybe they've recovered from something. I'm somebody who has been in the recovery space since June of 2006. And I can definitely tell you that now I'm old enough. I don't care what anybody thinks, but when I was first getting sober, it was really, really hard to, I would love to have you up, America. It's really, really hard to get sober when you feel like the entire world is against you. So I sent you an invite, America, if you want to hang out and chit chat. Thank you so much for stopping in. So it can show up in little ways, like passive aggressive ways when it comes to stigma. It can show up like jokes, people being called crazy, and people avoiding therapy because they're afraid of being labeled, or they've heard about somebody else's negative experience with therapy, And so they feel like there's a stigma with it, right? So don't forget to grab your daily heart me's, guys. So anyway, have you ever hesitated to open up? And this is a question for anybody in the chat. Have you ever hesitated to open up about your struggles because of what others might think? And while I'm waiting on some of you guys to answer that question, I'll go ahead and answer for myself. Yes, I have definitely hesitated to share things because of what other people think. And now I'm in a place in my life where I don't really care what other people think, because guess what? They don't live my life. They don't pay my bills. So what they think is what they think, and I'm not going to be able to change their mind. However, when I was in early recovery and fresh recovery, thank you so much, Joker, for joining. When I was in early recovery, it was something that I really struggled with. It was very hard to be open and honest because people only see you for the bad choices that you made, right? Oh, no worries. Okay, well, anytime, girl, anytime. But I would love if you want to just hang out and listen to me yap, because I can talk the entire 30 minutes. I'm so sorry you're not feeling good. I hope you feel better. So, reasons that people will stay silent often is fear of being judged, right? And it's really hard to put yourself out there just in the real world. Imagine trying to do it online, right? I've seen people that come online and they're trying to share their story like me, and people will just say some of the meanest and cruelest things in the comments, and it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. And I just really, really want to try to encourage people who are worried about being judged. Those people are probably assholes anyway. Okay. So try not to take it to heart. And it's so easy to say because I've been on this journey for 20 years and it is so hard to do, right? And even still, I struggle sometimes. Sometimes somebody can still get under my skin, but we really need to normalize the conversation around mental health and addiction. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much. Well, you are in a safe place, so welcome in. And so I think it's really important to remember a lot of times when you're seeing somebody, whether it's online or in real life, you are seeing one chapter of their life. You are seeing one chapter, one scene, one view. You don't know their whole backstory. You don't know where they are in that moment. And so it's really easy to judge people. And it's also because of that, it's really easy to feel judged. And, you know, my goal here is to help us normalize this conversation so much that we become desensitized to that judgment, right? Because we can't change what we did in the past, but we can change our future. And maybe we can even offer prevention. One small paragraph of their lives. Absolutely, G.I. Joy. Thank you so much for that comment. One small paragraph. There's a really amazing TED Talk I watched several years ago by a woman, and her name was, and I know I'm going to say her name wrong, but it's Chimamanda Ngozi. Okay. And she gave this really beautiful TED Talk that when we are meeting people, we are only meeting them in that chapter of their lives. We don't know the chapters before, and we don't know the chapters after. And it's an amazing speech. You can find it over on the Red and White app. If you're really interested in it, it is a wonderful, wonderful speech. Somebody is showing me so much love with them taps. I love this. I love that you were trying to break the stigma. The goal is, and I know that it is impossible to get everybody's perspective, especially because when you're a family who's been affected by addiction and people have stolen from you or lied to you or manipulated you for their habit, it's very, very hard not to have a jaded lens. And I will never take away from that because that is a valid experience. And I don't think people have to forgive people if they don't want to. You know, I would hope that they could see the other side. But a lot of times as addicts or people in recovery from anything, we have a hard time understanding the damage that we did to others while we were in that active use. And you're amazing. It's you tap, tap, tap in. That is awesome. I appreciate you so much. America is one of my little friends from over on this other app that just got shut down this week. And I am so happy she's here because she has some great content. She keeps it real over there. So if you guys don't know her, go check out her page, give her a follow because she is awesome. She is an engager and she is a bestie. So the other thing is that keep people from talking about their experiences. They don't want to lose opportunities, jobs, or relationships, right? Especially in the day of the internet where people really like to try and destroy somebody's life because they don't like what people have to say or something people did. And I'm not saying that in some cases that's not valid, but I am saying I have seen people brigade the hell out of people just because they didn't like them, and that's not cool. I am not a proponent for bullying. Am I a proponent for being petty as shit? Yes, but I don't believe in ruining people's livelihoods, especially because if they're already struggling with mental health and addiction, then they're not going to get better through shame. Sorry, we have a thunderstorm outside, so the lightning just scared the shit out of me. It's monsoon season. We ain't had rain all season. We got 2 weeks left, and now we're finally getting some rain. I'm gonna unplug my phone though, so my phone is charged enough now that I can talk. I just have this like paranoia about getting struck by lightning through electricity. Yeah, I can be petty level 5,000, and I won't lie, if you go to my page and somebody trolls me, I tend to troll right back and give them what I call a keyboard warrior award, where I do a really nice video. Thank you so much. I can tell that you love my page so much that you keep commenting, and then I go videotape a dog turd and say, here's your keyboard warrior award trophy, right? That's my way of coping. Is it appropriate? Probably not, but I work for myself. So if you want to complain to my boss, you go right on ahead. I'll see if she'll fire me. Okay. So yeah, so a few big reasons that people tend to stay quiet and not share their story is being judged, losing opportunities, losing jobs, losing relationships. And it is fun. I know. And sometimes the best response is no response, depending on the person, right? Because sometimes no response will drive that person crazier than if you responded. It really just depends on the person who's trying to get that reaction out of you, or at least that's just my opinion. Anyway, so think about this one as well. Fear of not being believed. And we see this a lot when it comes to things like assaults. We see people not being believed. We see people not being believed when they share their story because it's so outlandish, right? But truth can sometimes be stranger than fiction. And then there are people who just lie, and that is part of their condition, unfortunately. And, you can't argue with those people, but yeah, I'm getting way off track. That's my ADD brain, guys. So anyway, so fear of not being believed. So kind of just recapping, three reasons why people stay silent about their mental health and addiction issues, and maybe don't ask for help with whatever it is they're going through, right? It's really hard to communicate with others when you're afraid of being judged, when you're afraid of losing opportunities, and when you're afraid of people not believing you. And I know it's a fine line. I know it's a gray area, but we do need to remember that we don't always have everybody's backstory. And if someone comes and wants to share their story so that they can maybe help someone else, we want to look at the greater good. So think about all three of those things that I said for a second: fear of being judged, fear of losing opportunities, fear of not being believed. I want you to just think about that for a second. And I would really love if you guys can, in the chat, give me a couple of responses. Okay. So we're going to drop an A for judgment, B for opportunities, and C for not being believed. Which one do you relate to the most? A for judgment, B for opportunities, and C, not being believed, if that's a fear that you have. If you know someone needs help and they don't want help. So that's actually an amazing question. And I love that, because you literally cannot help somebody who doesn't want to be helped. And I say that as somebody who was that person who did not want help and had to be forced to get help. And in my case, it worked, but that is not the case for everybody. And I lost a very good friend who's very dear to me, to an overdose because we couldn't help her. It was like watching a train wreck. So I would always answer if she needed to talk, but I never could give money. I didn't want my money to be responsible for her death. And I hate that because, you feel like a bad friend because you're not helping them, but you can't help somebody kill themselves. You just can't. To me, it's not okay. But what you can do is you can say, hey, I'm here to listen. I'm not going to force you to get help. And that ties into harm reduction. And what harm reduction is for those who are outside of the mental health and recovery space, harm reduction is something that is kind of controversial because people tend to think that we're enabling the addicts. But what harm reduction is a path for somebody who wants to get sober. They're in what we would call the pre-contemplative state. They might get sober, maybe they won't. But if we give them acceptance of who they are as they are, that is sometimes the only harm reduction we can give, right? So I'll answer your calls, I'll talk to you, but I'm not going to enable you. That is still harm reduction. And I apologize because the more I talk, the more my allergies act up. So please, nobody go anywhere. I just got to grab a tissue. And as you guys can probably all tell, I am extremely passionate about talking about mental health and recovery. And just to sidestep and interrupt what we're talking about for just one moment, I have a playlist right now. I am doing a audio version of a book I wrote that is on Amazon as a playlist. I only have video one up today because I have been swamped this week. But it is called Memoirs of a Black Sheep. It is in my playlist, and this is a fictional version of my story. And I can answer questions later about why it's fictional, but I actually did a video that kind of explains it in there. But I don't want to get too sidetracked. But I just decided that I don't care what people think of me and what I did in the past. I want to stop other people from going through what I went through as somebody who was struggling with addiction. So if you guys want to hear a little bit about my story, most everything in that is true. It's fictionalized to keep people from catching cases, to not get sued in case somebody doesn't like what I say about them. And also so I could put things out of order, because not everything I talk about is chronological, but it's an experience that I had. I think there's only like one or two stories that are slightly fictional. The rest of it is all me and my experience with mental health and recovery. And I was addicted to a stimulant that rhymes with math. And I was a closet user for 18 months. And then after about 18 months, and I was a very closeted functional user. And after about 18 months, I became heavily addicted. For 6 months, I lost a lot of weight. I was 119 pounds when I was forced into treatment. I was looking so sickly and I thought I looked like the greatest thing on earth. Okay. So, I come from that raw experience, and I don't tell my story in a way to glorify it. There are some humorous parts and there are some crazy outlandish things, but I never, ever, ever want to glorify drug use or any of the experiences that I've been through, because those aren't things that I would ever want to promote. I do tell my story though from my perspective as an addict. So, but I hope I answered your question, America, as far as helping someone. Sometimes the only help you can offer is to watch from a distance, be available when they're ready, help them find resources when they need something, but don't be the resource yourself. And I know this is really, really hard to do with family members, but you have to set boundaries, because otherwise the person who's addicted is going to suck that whole family unit into their dysfunction. And I don't mean they're going to use, but a lot of times what you will see is if one person in the family gets sick, the whole family will adapt around that person, and then they get sick. And then if that person gets sober, nobody knows how to react, because it was such a gradual onset that when they change, the rest of the family doesn't know how to adjust. The VA hospital has broken us. Yes. And when it comes to veterans are a very high risk population. We have a lot of different subcultures of high risk populations. So I am not ever going to say somebody's worse off than someone else, but I can tell you we have populations that are higher risk. You have veterans, you have minorities, you have women, you have single mothers who are maybe struggling to make ends meet. Those are all going to be higher populations for drug use and mental health issues, especially if they don't have a supportive family or a supportive community. Welcome in, welcome in. Yes, that's exactly what you can do. And that's the only thing you can do. I call it loving them from a distance, because if we truly love them, we can still care, but we don't have to watch them destroy themselves. You know, it's a very difficult thing. And even when you give yourself that boundary, it is still going to take a toll on you. When I lost my friend, I didn't actually know for about 2 weeks that she was deceased. Her family was so done with her addiction that they didn't even tell anybody she died. They just cremated her. And then one day I went looking for her and saw that somebody had posted her obituary. And it was very, very hard because I would have went to her funeral. I cared and I understood their perspective about why they didn't want to support her addiction and why it was, so embarrassing and shameful to them. But I cared and I would have showed up for her. And so I know that addiction affects families negatively. I didn't wake up one day and say, I just want to be addicted to drugs. I was married to a drug dealer who dealt drugs the entire time we were married. I did not start using drugs until I had what I call a catalyst event. My father passed away and it was extremely traumatic. I was with him when he passed away and I walked around with PTSD for 10 years undiagnosed because I was pregnant and I was afraid I was going to lose my baby. And so I know how being in that lifestyle, even before using, can affect your entire family. It leaves what I call a ripple effect for years and years and years. And, even if you have a history, it's never too late to break the cycle. I'm sorry, guys. I didn't mean to get all emotional on you. That's something that to this day still really, really upsets me because her story was tragic. If her family knew like how she ended up on drugs, I think maybe they would have had a little more compassion. And I'm not saying they didn't, but it just felt very discompassionate because she had a lot of people who loved her. So back to the cost of silence and not talking about addiction and recovery, either as the person struggling or as the person in recovery. The problem with staying silent is that it doesn't make things better. And this kind of ties really nicely into a lot of broader topics where things go swept under the rug and they don't get talked about. They don't get better. They do not get better at all if you sweep things under the rug, right? I'm so sorry. Crying made me all gross now. So I look like Rudolph, but whatever. Anyway, but not talking about things actually makes them worse. And that's why you see generations and generations and generations with these family cycles, whether it's abuse, whether it's other types of abuse, whether it's addiction, whether it's homelessness or poverty. All of these things can sometimes become cyclical because asking for help brings so much judgment from people who don't even know you or how you got into these situations, right? So my goal here is to talk about it, normalize it. I don't care what people say to me for the most part, because I'm 43 years old, and if I got defeated every time somebody said something rude to me, I wouldn't even be able to do this right here, what I'm doing. Addiction runs very deep in my family. All the men, specifically on my dad's side, were and are. I'm guessing there's more to that. Maybe alcoholics or substance users. Anyway, so while I'm waiting on your other comments to come through, here's a stat that always hits me. And I want you guys to really think about this. If you're here and you're listening and you like what I have to say, nearly 60% of people with mental illness do not get treatment. And we know this because they're walking among us. They're ruling the country. Some of them, there's 60% of people with mental illness do not get any treatment, mainly because of stigma. That's 6 out of 10 people who need help and aren't getting it because they are afraid to speak up and use their voice. I've seen this in my own life. I've seen this with people I know and love. And I'm like, after getting my education, I am like the most accepting person I know when it comes to talking to me. You can literally talk to me about anything. Now, I do have morals. If you tell me something, I'm not a licensed therapist anymore. So if you come and tell me something you did atrocious that was like a crime, especially to a child or a vulnerable adult, I'm sorry. I'm still going to report it, even though I'm not a mandated reporter anymore. I'm still going to. However, I'm not going to judge you. I'm going to do it with love and care the entire way because that's just who I am. But if you come to me and you say, I'm struggling with addiction and I've been hiding it and you would never know and I don't know what to do and I need a resource, man, I'm going to be your best friend. I'm going to say, where do you live? What county are you in? What services are available where you are? Thank you so much for the rose. And, how can I better help you? I'm a big proponent of advocacy. I don't offer therapy services, obviously, and this is not a substitute for therapy. It's just a discussion and opinions. But I am going to do everything I can to point you in the right direction. I won't do all the work though, because part of getting sober and part of getting better is having the willingness to create the change on your part. And I'm just not one of those people that I'm not going to work harder for you to get sober or better than you are. You know, you come to me when you're ready and I will point you in the right direction, but I can't do everything for you, you know? Thank you so much, Erica. I like to say a lot, don't mind me. So when 60% of people with mental illness don't get treatment because of stigma, that means that people are suffering longer, relationship strain, and sometimes the outcome is tragic. And what the best example of this that I can give is, I don't know if anybody remembers, a couple of years ago, a woman went on a Facebook Live and said, I need someone to help me with my kids because I'm at my wit's end and I don't know what else to do. And I love my children, but I don't. Basically, she didn't want to hurt them. Welcome in, Andrew. Andrew, if you want to come up, I would love to have you for this discussion if you have time. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Andrew. So one of the things that I think happens a lot is we see people who they are actually asking for help and people are judging them. And I remember people were like, oh, she doesn't want her kids. She's just going to drop them off at the fire station. But if she would have kept her kids and something atrocious, oh, no worries. Okay, no worries. If something atrocious would have happened to those kids, she would have got judged for that too. And instead of people praising her for asking for help, people were judging her for asking for help. And I believe she ended up getting it all resolved. It took some time. But I remember people being like, I'll pray for you in that moment. And this is not to knock any kind of religion, but in a moment of crisis, I'll pray for you is not going to be enough for somebody who's saying, I can't handle my kids. Right. And people judged her so badly for that. And I was like in the comments, like, I'm so proud of you. I know how hard this must be as a mom who lost her kids because of addiction, and my mom had to raise my kids. I thought it was something amazing because I felt a lot of judgment for losing my kids. And then we agreed, my kids were included in this discussion. We agreed that the best thing for them was stability. I was still trying to get sober and I couldn't stay sober. And I saw a lot of girls in the system who they would get their kids back and then they would relapse and then they would lose their kids again. And I was so afraid that that would happen to me because I knew my head wasn't right. I was struggling just to have the mentality to stay right, to stay sober. And so I think we need to encourage people when they're asking for help so we don't end up with situations where somebody's a family annihilator because they don't have that help. It's not going to do anything. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Thank you, Andrew and Erica, so much. I can see you guys just tapping away for me. I appreciate that so much. So, thinking about that stat is probably higher. It's really probably higher because let's be honest, when it comes to statistics, you're getting a pool of people and not everybody's going to answer honestly. Some people might minimize their answers. Not everybody's going to be willing to participate and stuff like that. And you're absolutely right. Prayers are not going to be enough in a situation where somebody says, I need help right now. In this moment, I can't hold it together. That is somebody saying, I love my kids so much that I'm at my wit's end and I don't want to hurt them physically. I don't want to give them a traumatic childhood. And you think about all these kids that talk about parents who were so difficult to live with that it gave them childhood trauma. And here's somebody saying, I want to help myself. And maybe they weren't in that position when they had the kids, but they're in that position now because life is lifing. Thank you so much, Andrew. And, we stigmatize that. And it's like, you can't win no matter what. So again, back to the conversation about mental health, right? You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So if I tell you that I'm not okay and you judge me for it, nothing changes, right? But if I don't tell you I'm not okay and you're still going to judge me for it, then what does it matter, right? Ultimately, within reason, we want to do what's best for us and our families and our loved ones. And I've seen this in my own life. Silence can break you down. And, for years and years and years, we had people in my family, not my immediate family, but my extended family, who had issues with alcohol and substances, but we didn't talk about those things because we don't air out dirty laundry. And it's like, kind of would have been nice to know, not to embarrass or shame people, but so that I know when I'm making choices to be more conscientious about what I'm doing, right? So thank you so much. You guys are awesome with these tiny nineties. So you guys are, I am loving this tap in. I've got people participating. You guys are amazing. This is making my whole evening, because this was just kind of a, let me hop on and see who's on, and I'm just going to run my mouth for 30 minutes. So I'm excited that there's so many people here. So how can we fight stigma? What do you guys think when it comes to stigma? While you guys are answering in the chat how we can fight stigma, I'll tell you some of my opinions. One is doing what I'm doing now: awareness, communication, education. These are all things that help people. Now, you're not always going to win every person with your argument, whether it's harm reduction, abstinence, whatever. Everybody's going to have their own view, but if you can educate them, they might have a more open-minded approach about people on their recovery path, right? I think the biggest stigma is recovery is not linear, and people that haven't directly lived it or directly experienced somebody struggling with addiction have a harder time understanding that. But I think we live in a world now where most of us have experienced or been related to or known someone who has struggled with addiction. And if I jump again, guys, I'm sorry. We have lightning and thunder really, really close, but we're just going to keep rolling, okay? It's monsoon season. I'm happy it's raining. Good things are happening. So ways that we can fight, I honestly think there is no breaking that stigma with certain people. No, and I agree. It really does come down to, you know how like you can't please everybody, no matter who the president is, right? There's always a group of people who don't like that person. You can make Mickey Mouse the president and people will still have something to complain about, right? They'll be like, oh, his tail is too long, or his ears are too big, or I don't like the way he talks, right? It's the same concept with everything else. You're never going to win everybody, but you're definitely never going to win everybody with judgment. You can always win it by just listening. And what I've learned with arguing with people is not the way to go. Sometimes it's just like, well, this is just my opinion. Whoo, that sounded close. Let me educate you. God, that scared the shit out of me. I'm sorry, guys, but I can't stop. And I'm not plugged up, so I'm not going to get zapped. You guys are good. So, anyway, you're never going to please everybody no matter what. You're never going to get everybody on board. And that's actually what makes us all being different so wonderful. We don't all have to think the same. We don't all have to have group think. But we do want to educate people. You know, before I was addicted to substances, I thought it was a choice. People choose that. And I didn't know why they chose it. And why would they do this? And why would they do that? And I even was somebody who did not believe in medication-assisted treatment. And while I was never on a substance that required MAT, I was one of those people like, oh, you're just substituting a drug for a drug. It literally took me going to school and getting educated to understand that that is harm reduction. And if they're not out committing crimes and they're not getting sick and looking for their next dose, then they're still being productive members of society. And that's all we want, you know. And I could go on for days about how we got into that predicament with narcotics, but I'll save that for another live, right? But, you know, and I think ultimately the goal is educate, educate, educate. I'm so glad you said yes, yes. And I think too, part of it is education, culture, how we view the world, religion, and then learning about people's human experience, because every single one of us has a different human experience, right? We all come from all walks of lives. You know, I was raised in Southern Arizona. I'm in Northern Arizona now. And, you know, I joined the service and it was culture shock. Okay. I grew up in a community that was, at the time, it's not this way anymore, but it was predominantly Hispanic because we had a lot of migrant workers. So to me, they were just regular people. There were people that I met in the service that had never seen anybody who wasn't white. And you got to think about this. Every single one of us has such a unique experience because of where we live. We have subcultures within subcultures within subcultures because you got to think about religion, family dynamics, small town energy, stuff like that. And mental health does have a big part to play in most of people's addictions. You're absolutely right. And one question we used to ponder back and forth in school and even when I was working was, did the trauma come first or the addiction? And I could almost always find that the trauma came first. And what people think is trauma is not always trauma, right? And I say this not the way it sounds. A lot of people picture PTSD or trauma as combat related, war related, being shot at. No, trauma can be listening to your dad beat on your mom every single day in your childhood. My mom's trauma was her mother was her first bully. Her mother was her first bully. Her mother was so jealous of her. And I did not understand that until my mom was like in her late 50s. And one day I was like, Mom, your mom's very jealous of you. She loves you, but she's very jealous of you. And that is trauma. Right. And she used to say some of the meanest things about my mom. And I'm not going to go on about my grandma because she's deceased now. And she honestly, I think she had a lot of childhood trauma too. So it was a cycle. And I got very lucky because instead of my mom giving me a traumatic childhood, she actually gave me a very good childhood. So in a lot of ways, my mom was a cycle breaker too. But families can play a role in trauma and people don't always recognize that, right? Going home and listening to your mom get beat up or going home and, having parents using substances or partying all the time. Those are not really normal childhood experiences. So, I think it's really important. I'm inviting you, but if you can't hop on, that's fine. Beth's inner voice. My mother did some messed up stuff to me as a kid, but I understand she went through messed up stuff too. And I think I gave my grandma a lot of forgiveness because I understand she was working with the generation of her mother was part of the silent generation and abuse and things like that wasn't talked about. So I give my grandmother a lot of grace, but she also thought I was one of the smartest people she knew and she still could not change her ways as much as I tried to educate her. And it was really hard, and I ended up being the person who took care of my grandma before she passed away. And that was a very difficult thing, but I learned a lot about what kind of mom she was as her memory started to go, and it hurt. It like broke my heart because I was like, this is what my mom dealt with as a child. And she liked me, she liked me, but I had to hear a lot of mean stuff. And it had to be traumatic. And I remember my mom telling me recently, like she would go to bed at night and she would have to listen to her mom scream at her dad for hours and hours and hours. And I'm just going to say I love my grandpa to death, but they were a toxic couple because they very much would scream at each other. So yeah. And that's the thing. And I think you can heal too. So, and I'll share a personal story about that too, right? Because I'm pretty sure that I contributed to my children's trauma in childhood. And I hate that. I'm embarrassed of it and I'm ashamed of it. But you know what? My mom raising my kids, even though her house was dysfunctional, but there wasn't drugs and stuff in it. That was traumatic for my kids to go through that. They had to be taken from everything they knew because I didn't have my shit together and it wasn't fair to them. But one of the things I did that I'm actually really proud of, I used to be really ashamed of, but I'm really proud of now, was my mom requested custody after she could see I was really struggling. And I allowed her to have, thank you so much for the heart me. I allowed her to have custody. And everybody, that is my mod. Grandma Wolf is my mod. Say hello to Grandma Wolf. And so I allowed her to have custody and my kids had a somewhat stable environment. There were things that they couldn't necessarily change, but it is storming. So if I cut out, I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying to do the best I can. And my son, when he was 7 years old, we went to therapy and I'll never forget this. I'll never forget it. He wanted to tell me how I had hurt him with my addiction when, before he was taken from me. And he couldn't even bring himself to say the words because, and this is what he said later on was, I thought that I was wrong to be angry with my mom. And it was so wonderful that this happened in therapy because I cried. I broke down and cried. And I was like, you should not be upset for being angry with me. Like, you had every right to be angry with me. What I did was wrong. What I did was not okay. You deserved better. And that really started us on a journey to healing and rebuilding that relationship. And it took a long, long time, for him to forgive me. And I am so freaking happy to say we have me and all of my children have an amazing relationship now, because I was willing to go through that and hear the things that I knew I didn't want to hear. It also helped me stay motivated to stay sober, because it's like, I broke their heart once. I would never want to do that again, Thank you so much, Grandma Wolf. I appreciate that. It was really, really, really hard to do. And I remember leaving and just bawling my eyes out where he could see me, because I was like, I can't believe I did that. And I'm so sorry, guys. Between allergies and these emotional stories, I feel so gross. So I'm so sorry. Accountability at its best. Well, and that's the thing. I had spent so long lying because of my addiction and refusing to acknowledge that there was something wrong with my mental health outside of the addiction, that I tell the truth now, even when it's extremely uncomfortable. Even when it's extremely uncomfortable, I'm so far the other way. I will tell you the truth. And it was actually really good, because I've needed that capability in I do not sugarcoat shit. I do not beat around the bush. I will tell you exactly what I think, but I'm always going to say it in a way and say it with love. Thank you so much for listening to me. I appreciate that. So, kind of going back to breaking the cycle and fighting stigma, doing what I'm doing here today, but not just me, everybody who's sharing their story, is one way that we can break that cycle and break that stigma. And, like Erica said, we're never going to fully break the stigma, but if we start normalizing the conversation, you're going to have more allies than you are opponents, right? So, ways that we can fight the stigma, just as everyday people, you can use everyday language. Instead of saying, I'm also clinically depressed, you can say, I'm struggling right now too, and that helps normalize, but it's also relatable. You can also, yes, you can also lead with empathy. It's really easy. And I know this because I'm just going to reintroduce myself so you guys know who I am and why I do this. My name is Jamie. I was an addict for almost 2 years. I was a stimulant addict. I joined the Army to fix my life. And that's a whole other story for another day. I got a bachelor's degree in psychology, a master's degree in Christian counseling of substance abuse and addictive disorders, even though I no longer practice Christianity. I have I started a program in forensic psychology at a master's level, and I started a program at a doctoral level in forensic psychology. I love psychology. I could talk psychology for hours. I completed my internship for my license to get an addiction counseling license when I held one here in the state of Arizona at Arizona State Prison. I worked with one of the most resistant populations to treatment there can be, and it was the best experience ever. I worked in the prison for almost 2 years with inmates, and let me tell you, when you think people are going to prison to get treatment, they're not. And that's not to say that they're not getting any services. The demand is greater than what can be supplied. Okay. And you have a large population of people in prisons who are mentally ill and coping with drugs. And that's all I can really say about that. I loved it. And after that job, I went to work with children who were DCS involved. That was another whole new experience for me. I did that for 9 months. I had 110 kids on my caseload when I left that job. I burned out very, very easily. And then I ended up in a group home working with adults who had dual diagnosis, so mental health and addiction issues. And I did that job for almost 2 years and I absolutely loved it. But then I had a midlife crisis and decided I would rather write full-time and advocate for mental health full-time as opposed to being a therapist. And there's another whole story in that, but those are my credentials. This is why I'm passionate about what I do. I don't hold a license. I don't do therapy, but I do love to advocate. I love to advocate for people. And I've recently become more of an advocate on the veterans end of mental health, but that's just because that's a community I'm closely associated with, because I will advocate for anyone who needs mental health services or addiction services. So my goal is, when trying to reduce the stigma, is we want to lead with empathy. We don't want to give advice right away. Sometimes people just want to be heard, feel heard. Thank you. You love, oh, awesome. So we're going to get along just great. Okay, well, I get on every Sunday night at 4:32, and you're always welcome to join that live. I think I'm going to try to start doing a 4:30 live every single day, but I can't commit to that right now. But Sundays, I do commit to every Sunday night at 4:30 p.m., and we talk mental health, addiction, recovery, just social issues, whatever's going on that week. I try to find a topic and we cover it. And thank you guys so much. Look at that. I am up to 7,000 taps in 38 minutes. That is the most taps I've had in half an hour ever on a live. I just want you guys to know you are awesome, and I appreciate every single one of you who is here listening to me. And if you have questions while I'm going through my little spiel, please drop them in the chat. If you want to come up and talk about things, let me know, okay? I am 100% on board because I could talk about this literally for hours. So lead with empathy instead of giving advice. People want to be heard. And you can share that, you can understand a struggle, but few things that people don't want to hear is, I know what you're going through, right? You can rephrase that as, I understand that must be so difficult for you, or how can I help? Do you want feedback? Do you want support? What can I do for you in this moment? And you can still have boundaries, because some people are going to push those boundaries in that moment because they're vulnerable, but they also might take advantage of your kindness. So it's okay to set boundaries in those situations too. Normalize help. Normalize help. Just like we go to the doctor for a broken bone or cancer, therapy is care for the mind. All right, Andrew, you're home now. I'm going to send you an invite. Hopefully that works. I don't know. If it didn't work, send me a request, but I think the invite went. Hopefully. Anyway, because I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Guys, this is Andrew Case. He's another creator here on TikTok. He does a lot of like tea channel type stuff, but he also works in the addiction and mental health scene. So I love getting on chats with Andrew. Hi, Andrew. How are you doing?
Hi, Jamie. I'm good. How are you?
I am great. I decided to do a pop-up live, and it's actually going really well.
I love it. I love everything I've heard so far.
Oh, awesome. Well, what are your thoughts on some of what I'm saying? Because I got to step away and get a tissue, and I need somebody to talk for 2 seconds.
I love it. Well, I love what you were talking about earlier, that recovery is not linear, and there are so many different ways to recover nowadays. A lot of people who, if they haven't personally experienced it themselves, if they haven't been through any sort of addiction themselves or had a family member or someone close to them go through this, then they don't know.
Right.
And there's so many different ways to recover and not use anymore. But we live in a new world. It's 2025. And the old school model was, abstinence only. And now, harm reduction has become more popular. And I think more people are educating themselves or gaining the awareness about it. And I will just say, when it comes to MAT, I know when it comes to, this is tricky topic, when it comes to 12-step programs and fellowships.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand using those words, clean and sober. Hey, America, nice to meet you too. It's the 12-step programs are very strict when it comes to those on MAT. I get it. I really do. But I personally don't even care. I feel like if you're not putting a needle in your arm, or you're not doing something, taking a poison pill, then you're clean or sober. And I don't understand why within the recovery community, there's this stigma. We have to face a lot from the outside and have to defeat this stigma from people who aren't even in this community, who think, who still think their archaic belief is once an addict, always an addict. And we're still fighting against that. But within the community, we have more work to do. And I will just say, I take great offense to the recovery influencers on TikTok who have gained a lot of success, and they have hundreds of thousands of followers or even millions. And they basically shit on people who are still struggling. They judge them. There is one, I will name her, I think Trashly Anonymous, whatever name that is, who literally called MAT clinics trap houses. That
Hmm.
is not, it's not just offensive, it's wrong and so harmful, so destructive. Calling an MAT clinic that is employed with medical health professionals a trap house is honestly disgusting.
Well, and I
Just,
think one thing people don't realize, especially when it comes to medication assisted treatment, narcotics are not the only substance that's treated with medication. People who struggle with alcohol get medication so that they don't
yes.
trade alcohol. And for those outside of the community, they may not know that. And the thing about MAT as a whole is the goal is ultimately for them to start being productive. Some people can come off of MAT,
Hmm.
especially now that they have things like Sublocade. And some
Hmm.
people cannot come off of MAT. They try and they can't, and they feel like a failure because they can't. And to me, if you're being productive and you are doing what you need to do to have your life together, we shouldn't be focused on that. And I will say, as far as like the 12 step community, I have noticed in some areas they're starting to come away from the concept that MAT is not sobriety, but it does still
Hmm.
really depend on where you're at. But and here's the thing, I support all paths to recovery. So just because one doesn't work for me doesn't mean that it won't work for someone else. I
Same here.
tried the 12 steps, but for me, it was a self fulfilling prophecy to say I was an addict. I am somebody in recovery and I want to stay that way. But what I can say is that I've known people that have done the 12 steps and they are still sober to this day. And
Hmm.
everybody has a different path to addiction and everybody has a different path to sobriety. And sometimes the best where, and this is where people don't understand, sometimes the best you're ever going to get out of somebody is they reduce their use. So they
Yes.
might still be using, but now they're using 3 times a week instead of 3 times a day. And
Yeah.
that is still a path towards a better life than what it was. And I also think it's very dangerous to get caught up in the abstinence only, because one
Mhm.
thing that we've seen, and I'm sure you know this, Andrew, is people will go out and use like they used before they got sober. So
Yes.
if I was using a
Hmm.
large amount of something and then I get sober and then I go and buy a large amount of something, it can lead to an overdose that's deadly. Narcan
Absolutely.
Narcan is not Narcan is another example where there's a stigma. You're not giving people free treatment. You're saving their lives to give them another chance to get better. And
Yes.
how many people have said, I was revived 6, 7, 8 times before I finally decided I didn't want to live like that anymore? And when people talk about writing people off, they're forgetting that is somebody's loved one.
Yes. And I also think that's the disparaging comments people make about, and I've seen those horrible memes, unfortunately, on Clapper, which I'm not surprised, about how Narcan is free and how insulin costs a lot of money. And it's like, well, maybe you want to talk
That's the
about
pharmacy
lobbying
companies.
and
Yeah.
pharmaceutical companies about that one. And it's like Narcan literally saves lives, and it's relatively easy, cost efficient to produce. Also,
Mhm.
what's happening nowadays is why the Narcan needs to be made stronger is that there are more Narcan resistant substances
Yes.
seeping into the rug supply. So
Yes.
it's not just fentanyl. We have things like xylazine, which is showing up in um, snow, and
Right.
a lot of people don't realize the xylazine is causing almost like this flesh eating virus. I know it
Yes.
sounds really crazy or sci-fi, but that's horrible. And xylazine as well as medetomidine are showing up now, and they're both horse tranquilizers.
Hmm.
These are not things that should be ingested in any way.
Right.
And I would hope that people could just extend, honestly, more empathy and compassion for anyone struggling. Addiction is a disease. It does not discriminate. And I tell people all the time, you cannot think your way out of addiction. It
Right.
doesn't work like that. It doesn't
Right.
work like that.
Right. And I think too, another important thing that people forget is the reason the opioid epidemic ever occurred was because in the late 90s and the early 2000s, doctors were being sold that
Yes.
oxycodone
Mhm.
was safer than Vicodin. So dentists were giving it after tooth recovery.
Yep.
And then they knew in their own research that people were needing more and more because of tolerance, and it was actually making their physical pain worse. And so they had all these pain clinics, and then they shut down all the pain clinics, and they weren't giving people a taper schedule. So these people just had nowhere to go. So they ended up going to the streets to avoid getting sick instead of treatment. And they had no plan. So the same people who got these people sick are now the same people with the medication to help make them better. So it's like you're mad at the wrong people when you say, look, diabetes is not the only condition where drugs are outrageous. Look at EpiPens. People
Yeah.
can literally die from an allergy because it is so expensive.
Yes.
And I think
And
people also forget there's more addictions than substances. We have processed
yes,
addictions, gambling, shopping, eating.
sex.
Everybody
Yeah.
wants to talk about fat people, right? And I say this as somebody who's struggling with their weight, but food is an addiction, and it's an even
Absolutely.
stronger struggle because you have to have it.
Yes. Yes. And honestly, I've struggled with my weight on and off over the years too. Post COVID, I was carrying around a lot of quarantine weight, and I've truly felt awful about myself.
Right.
And now I feel like I'm resorting to food because that is an addiction, and food just gives me a lot of comfort. And it's so cliche, but sometimes I like to eat my feelings, and now my weight is like, yo-yoing, and it's just, yeah, a lot of people don't realize how many addictions there are.
People don't
And
understand that self-harm
they don't.
can actually be a form of addiction. And I mean self-harm for
Absolutely.
people who cut, people who struggle with eating disorders. And I don't just mean the ones where we get heavier, the ones where we get thinner too. Those are process addictions. And it's a lot of times what people also don't understand is this all ties back to trauma, right? This is a trauma response. What do we have control over? We either have no
Yes.
control, or we have control over our eating, or whatever the thing is. And, and they've even found that sometimes misdiagnoses can lead to addiction because somebody's struggling with impulsivity and they're not getting behavioral interventions. They're not getting medication interventions, which aren't always required, but or they're just not being heard. You know how many times I got in trouble in school because I'm a talker? Well, guess what? I have ADHD. Of course I couldn't focus in school. My brain was always somewhere else other than where it wanted to be, unless it was something I was passionate about. And that misdiagnosis kept me sick for a long, long time. Now I know I have to have a schedule. I have to put my shoes on every day, or I'm not going to do shit. If I get on the phone, it better be productive, or I'm going to get sucked into the rabbit hole. And it's like every single person that has a human experience, it is so complex. So it's so easy to generalize and be like, all addicts are trash. You know what? People in general can be trash. They don't even have to have an addiction.
Exactly.
So we need to stop generalizing.
Yes, and what you were saying about how doctors were sold on OxyContin, they were all showed that video, courtesy of the Sacklers, that less than 1% of people develop an addiction. Oh my God, how egregious, and the harm they did. And I cannot tell you, and how many people have become addicted to things because they were once prescribed medication and they no longer have it. It also sounds like very cliche, but it's so true. And people think, addiction is still like representative of some moral decay, and it's like you were raised poorly or you're just a bad person, and it's like, oh God, we have to eliminate these stereotypes, and people seriously need to educate themselves because we are literally losing so many people because drugs are poison now.
Well, I have good news. The good news is they are showing that overdose deaths are down.
Yes, I have seen that.
And I think that is amazing. But you have to think about this. 20 years later, we are still feeling the ripple effect of what the Sacklers did in the late 90s, early 2000s, 20 years later. And if you've ever seen the video it was a fiction, but it was based on the book. I can't remember the author's name, about the Sacklers. I think it was actually a series on Netflix or Hulu. And a lot of the... Yeah, Dope Sick. Okay,
wonderful, with Michael Keaton. Yes.
And he was, when you look at the story, he was representing multiple doctors that went through this experience. So he was actually based off of several different experiences that the author writing the original story found in her research. But when the Sacklers when the government started going into the Sacklers paperwork, they showed up with 2 U-Hauls worth of paperwork just to try to bury the government so bad they wouldn't look. So you got to think,
Yeah.
for years and years and years, they dragged out what they did. So every day that the government spent looking through those documents was a day that we were losing more and more and more and more people for no reason, because of money. And people want to be mad at the people with the addiction instead of the people who allowed it. And the government isn't blameless in this. Just because they prosecuted it didn't make them blameless. You got to look at the FDA. How many of the doctors did
Yes.
the FDA pull? Or how many of the doctors from the FDA went to work for the Sacklers?
Mm-hmm. And
So,
I'll just say, I unfortunately know what overdose is like. It's awful. I personally, it happened to me as many times as I can remember, at least 7. And I will just tell you, only one of those instances. That's what I wanted to happen. I just wanted to keep using and getting high. I didn't want to OD, and now it's just so common. And
right,
unfortunately, when people are clean or sober for a while and they go back to use, they will, especially with abstinence, as you were saying before, they will go back to using the same amount they always used, which is more
right,
likely to cause a fatal OD, which is
right.
awful. And I just also don't understand why there's so much poison out there in these substances. It's awful. And the last thing I'll say, there have been so many advancements in the recovery field, especially with MAT, not just Suboxone, but of course Vivitrol. People don't realize that Vivitrol is used for those with alcohol addiction, and
And
is
carbs. Is
Sublocade. And
Vivitrol
there's so many different options now.
right, right. Is Vivitrol the one that's naltrexone?
Yes.
Okay. Naltrexone is also, if people don't know this, naltrexone is also now being used for binge eating disorder, or if you're struggling with overeating and then maybe you want to like purge. It's also being prescribed for that because it also helps you not crave carbs as much either. So when we're talking medication assisted treatment, we're not even just talking opioids anymore. We are talking addictive behaviors. Hi Selena, welcome.
Hey,
Selena's
Selena.
Selena's another creator here on TikTok. She does a lot of beauty content, but Selena also does a lot of talks about her own mental health journey. So you guys, I don't know if Selena has anything to say, but the floor is open, girl.
Hey, girl.
I came at the perfect time. This is so a conversation that I should be a part of because I've been open about having a really horrible relationship with food, and sometimes I wonder if I really have an addiction. I've never been diagnosed as to having an addiction to food, so I won't say, oh yeah, I have one, but sometimes I wonder, and you mentioned medication that binge eaters take, and it got my little ears perked up. I was like, wait, there's hope out there? What?
There's Contrave, and look, I'm not a pharmacist, and this is just opinion and chit chat discussion. So please, nobody take this that way. But there's Contrave. Contrave is a combination of Wellbutrin and naltrexone, and then there is some people take just naltrexone because Contrave, I believe, is still name brand. So not everybody's insurance covers it, but I've seen doctors prescribe Wellbutrin and naltrexone, the generics, together, so that way people can still get the same effect.
Oh, wow.
So if you didn't know that, now you know. I
didn't know. I had no idea.
Yeah, and a lot of times Wellbutrin is covered by insurance. And in fact,
Yes.
I think Wellbutrin is the first line before they'll add the naltrexone. But if you are somebody who likes to sip on wine once in a while, then Contrave or naltrexone might not be for you. You won't get a buzz, but I don't know. I've heard people say it upsets their stomach. I've never used it for that. But yeah, just so you guys know. I will tell you, Wellbutrin made me hate the taste of cigarettes. So now I vape on and off. I quit, then I start, then I quit, then I start. But Wellbutrin made me hate the taste of cigarettes. It's supposed to take like 2 weeks to kick in. And I think within 3 days, I thought cigarettes tasted disgusting.
I also just want to say I am not a licensed health professional. I am not an MAT provider, but I know that or a psychiatrist, but I know that Wellbutrin is a commonly prescribed medication for those in recovery, especially early recovery. Also, I do know that those who have opted for naltrexone, it obviously depends on the person and it's a case by case basis, but
Right.
sometimes some people can't deal with the side effects. And so in lieu of naltrexone, because they might have an upset stomach or something because it goes through your gut, they opt for Sublocade, which is a shot which bypasses that. So they don't get the same side effects. So that's why Sublocade is becoming more popular. And I do have to say, I'm happy that MAT like Suboxone is out there, and that's the most common one. But it is kind of sinister
I
that.
have heard good and bad about that because I've heard it's great because it's longer lasting, so people are able to taper better. But I've also heard that it literally does depend on like how much you use and your body chemistry
It
and
does.
stuff like that. And I don't know if a lot of people know this. You might, Andrew. I don't know about you, Selena. They now do this thing called gene site testing where they can actually take your lab work, your blood, and they can test it and see what medications might actually work better for you for mental health and addiction. And I don't know if it's something they do in other health industries, but I do know when I worked in a group home, it was something that they did for the mental health clients.
Oh, wow. Oh, my God.
Because
That's amazing.
sometimes you have clients that are treatment resistant or they've been on medications for so long the medications don't work anymore and they don't know what else to put them on. And unfortunately, sometimes nothing will work for some people. But yeah, they do have a thing, and not everybody's able to get gene site testing. I know our Medicaid used to pay for it if you had Medicaid clients. And I've heard sometimes private insurance will pay for it, but it's not accessible everywhere. I think it should be because I think it would save a lot of money if you have people struggling to find a treatment that works for them. And one thing I'm liking that I'm seeing now in the community is ketamine treatment for treatment
Yes.
resistant
Ketamine
depression.
infusions.
Yes. And I think because you have some people with severe diagnoses that are benefiting from it. And I think like another one that I just saw recently an article about is they're looking at psilocybin for trauma. They're trying to do studies on psilocybin for trauma as well as that E stimulant that I don't want to say, and E that's related to math. It's like a close chemical compound. They're thinking about that. And then there's the people that there's now a place here on TikTok actually that I've seen is a clinic where you can go and they will actually let you sleep through your withdrawals if you want to get off and just not be on anything. They'll put you to sleep for like a week. You wake up and eat and do vitals, but you can sleep through your withdrawals so you're not getting sick. And they give you like Zofran and whatever other stuff. I can't remember their name. I follow them, but if you put in the search bar, you could probably find sleep through withdrawals.
Oh, that's fascinating. I definitely want to look at that.
I'm curious about the studies. I'm curious about the studies on it. I would think it would make sense, but I don't know enough about it.
The last thing I was going to say about Suboxone is that I know it's helped a lot of people, and there are people who have been on it for a little bit, weaned off, and they were good. People have stayed on it for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and then they get off. It all depends. But the issue with Suboxone is that the withdrawals from Suboxone are worse than that of the actual substance. And that is very sad and unfortunate.
That's what I've heard. And then I've heard that it kind of depends again. When I was working in a detox center before I went for my internship, there was a girl in there who said she had done every kind of attempt to get sober. It was really interesting. One of the things she had said was they had a Catholic treatment center where the nurses would sit with you while you got sick in your withdrawals, and they would help clean you up. They would hold your hair. They would make sure you didn't choke. And it was amazing. And she said she couldn't believe that she went through all that and went out and used again. And she was so like frustrated with herself for it. But she also said she had tried the methadone and Suboxone. And she said for her, methadone had a really bad effect on her bones. Like her bones would just hurt. So she did the Suboxone. So I do think part of it is chemistry. But people who think that you can just white knuckle sobriety, especially for things that can literally make you sick when you're withdrawing, like alcohol and
Alcohol and benzo
narcotics,
withdrawal can literally
benzos, yeah,
be
benzos, and
fatal.
a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah. I know there's still people that don't know that. And I mean, I hope there's more awareness and education spreading about that. But people who don't know withdrawals could be absolutely brutal unless you know yourself or you've seen it or you've heard. They're terrible.
I just want to say I've just gotten the most likes in a live ever, 19,000. You guys are awesome. So thank you so much for that. That just made my day because this has been one of the least length of time online and the most amount of likes. So that's freaking awesome. You guys are awesome. So yeah, and see, look, there's people here. Erica said she's never. I added you once and it said your network wasn't working, but I'll add you again. But there's a girl in here who said that it's Erica. She said, don't, I don't know how people don't know that. Well, because people don't talk about it. And then you have people. So here's my advice too. And I don't normally do advice, right? When you see a recovery influencer or somebody talking about recovery, just remember that their journey isn't the only way. So what
Yes.
worked for them may not work for someone else, because I'm not going to take away from people who abstinence has worked for them. But you also have to recognize that everybody is different on their recovery journey. And like I was saying before, where just because like the path to addiction isn't linear, the path to recovery isn't linear, because there are people who you would never expect to develop a drug addiction, and then they go through some sort of crisis, and the next thing you know, here we are. So I'm willing to listen to all perspectives. That doesn't mean we have to agree with them. I definitely tend to avoid people who bash a different type of treatment, because I'll tell you 12 steps wasn't for me, but I will never bash it, because
Yeah.
I have a dear friend who 12 steps worked for them, and it still works for them, and it does wonders for them. And I think, it at the time that it was developed, it was one of the only treatments besides being put in the hospital,
Yeah.
and so it's effective for a reason. But I feel like for me, it didn't work. You also have options like Celebrate Recovery, which is a secular program where you just talk about recovery and you connect with other people who are struggling, and they're all in different places in their addiction. And the thing is, you can find whatever you're looking for wherever you go, whether you want to use or don't use,
Yeah. They have Dharma recovery. They have smart recovery. There's so
Smart
many
recovery
different
is another one.
avenues to go down.
And
Um,
Celebrate
uh,
Recovery has the umbrella of everything: process addictions, eating addictions,
oh, wow.
anorexia, substance use. They have all kinds of resources. And that was one that I thought was amazing, because they're really trying to cater to everybody I think they even have, I'm not 100% sure, but I think they even have programs for family members of the people going through these things. And I know the 12 steps does too. But again, everything is different. And I'll tell you what, like the 12 steps does have some things right? Like you have to admit that there is a problem before you can do
Yes.
anything. And of course, you might be familiar with the 5 stages of change, which is
Yes.
pre-contemplative, contemplative. Well,
Yep.
some people are in the pre-contemplative stage of change and they're not ready to admit it, but they think because everyone's down their throat, there might be a problem. And that's where harm reduction kicks in.
Yes. Absolutely. And
Our
they're
addiction or
just,
mental health isn't unique. Our paths and processes are unique. I like that. That's true, because, ultimately, addiction and mental health issues can present very similarly, but how we get there is definitely going to be different. It's kind of like, and I think we talked about this the other day, where you can have a family and 3 kids in a home, and every single one of those kids will have had a different childhood experience. And that doesn't mean that they're lying, that, it wasn't really that way. It means their role in the family gave them a different view of what was going on in the home. That's why sometimes you'll see somebody say, we weren't abused as kids. Well, maybe you weren't abused as a child, or maybe you didn't interpret that as abuse. It's kind of the same with addiction, really.
yes. And what you said about other recovery influencers, that is definitely their experience and that's their path and how they got clean or sober and they maintained their recovery. There are other influencers. There's one, I forgot their name. Again, they're a very popular recovery influencer on TikTok who once said, I think this happened last year, who literally made a video telling people you have to, if someone's still using, you have to make it very hard for them. You don't give them food, you don't give them anything. And I'm just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm not going to give advice. I'm just going to give my experience. In the
Right.
past, people I have known who were struggling, I didn't give them cash, but I paid for a room. I got
Right.
them an Uber. I got them
Right.
food. I'm
Take them
like
to
not
eat.
not feeding them. I'm like I think people go a little too far, and it's all about extremes for some of these people. But
Right.
I again, I just think it's about having more empathy and compassion, and that's what we're lacking, along with awareness, education, communication, and just
Right.
an overall understanding of all of this.
Right. Right. And I think that's the biggest thing too is, and Erica said earlier in the chat that she feels like the younger generation is more open to talking about mental health than the older generation. And I think that kind of ties back to something I was saying earlier that I don't know if you were here for, but it's like my grandmother's generation was taught to sweep everything under the rug. But we're slowly starting to break those generational cycles with each new generation because you have people like me who I'm going to just tell my story. And if people don't like me for, oh, well, like it is what it is. Okay, so I did a YouTube video last week and I said something about why AA isn't the path for everyone. And I knew that there were going to be people that feel some type of way about it. But somebody was like, you just said a whole lot of words just to say you don't like AA. And I never said I didn't like AA. And someone else said, then the message wasn't for you. And that's the thing. I'm trying to cater to everybody as much as I can in the sense that these are your options for recovery. This one might not work for you, but this one might. Some people can go sober and never have to go to rehab. Some people can use experimentally and never get addicted. So it's like literally everybody's journey is different. I know people who can still casually use and then go back to their regular life and it's like a 2 or 3 time a year thing. I'm not that person.
Yes, I feel the same way. There are all different types of people out there. I know people who could stick to, they love, flowering, greenery,
Right.
and maybe they once identified as an addict, but that's all they do and they don't touch anything else. And I'm
Right.
like, if you could do that, good for you, more power to you.
Right.
And
My YouTube channel is Jamie the Writer. And I actually sometimes, when I'm not way behind on shit, I actually post some of the recaps from the lives over there, Erica. Sorry, Andrew.
no, you're good. And what was I going to say?
I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. And no, just talking about different paths to recovery. And I will just say, I personally have had an awesome experience with 12 step, but I know that's not everybody's. And
Right.
also, what I tell some people is take what works and leave the rest.
Yes.
Who says you have
That's
to
harm
take
reduction.
everything? Exactly. It's just like, see what works for you. And the thing is, why there's so much why I feel like there's so much stigma, around this, and especially with people who are so judgmental about those who engage in MAT, is that we have to remember our primary purpose, so to speak. Our goal at the end of the day is to save lives, right?
Right.
So why does it matter if someone's a clean or sober from MAT or something? Like, you want them alive, you want them in your life, right? So
Right.
I think that's
Thank you, Tina.
there's still more work to do.
Right. And and the ultimate goal at the end of the day is right. And this really goes to, we want quality over quantity of life, right? But we forget to think that sometimes in order to get quality of life, we have to do intervention and prevention in a way that shows empathy and compassion. And one of the reasons why unconditional regard is such a big thing, thank you so much, Tina, is in therapy, is because if you're not letting someone understand that you care and you understand them, why the fuck would they change?
Yep.
That why would I change if you think I can't do it anyway? And I'm the kind of person where if you say I can't do something, I'm going to say, let me prove you wrong. But
Absolutely.
not everybody has that. And I didn't used to be that way. I used to be the kind of person where if you kicked me while I was down, I would stay down. It took me a long time to get to a stage where it's like, oh, you think I can't? I got something for you. I'm going to prove you wrong. You know, and that's just the way I do. And it's like, it's such a complex topic and people want simple solutions. And it's just not that simple.
Exactly. And I will just say, especially what you were just talking about, to your point about proving someone wrong, I think it's from Latrice Royale once said this, like, if you fall down, like, you get back up, you look sickening, and you make them eat it.
Right.
And I love that.
You can fall down, you get to be embarrassed, you get to be mad, you get to be angry, but God damn it, get back up, you know?
Yes.
D-Vash wants to join the live. Yes, you can join the live. Let me send you an invite. So yeah, and I think it's really important. I think it's really important that people understand that, you know, there's no right or wrong way to live your life when it comes to recovery. It's not, I don't know how to say it. D-Vash, I sent you an invite. I don't know why it's not working, but there we go. Invite. We'll try it again. So, you know, there's no right or wrong way to get clean. I lost my train of thought on that. My brain is, I've had too much caffeine and it should actually be having the opposite effect for me. Like I should be able to think clearer, but it's not working. But, you know, and I think this has been an amazing conversation. And I'm so glad that you hopped on, and I see Selena's gone, but I'm so glad that she had hopped on earlier too, because
me too.
I think I'm going to start doing these pop-ups during the week. I just don't know if I'll do them every day. But I mean, the reality is the stigma is real. The silence makes it worse, but we all have the power to change that. And I will scream at the top of my lungs for change, but the more of us that are doing that, the better chances we have of actually seeing change. And I think one of the biggest barriers we have here, especially because of our healthcare system in the US, is our politicians, despite all the addiction and alcoholism that goes on in Congress that we know about, they don't really understand the policies that they have in place for treating addiction.
They don't.
They don't understand that you have to have access to treatment. You have to fund treatment. And I'm a big proponent of a 2-year treatment program. And the reason why I say that is because it literally takes 2 years for some people for their brain to be rewired and for them to condition those good positive habits. And when you're cycling people in for 90 days at a time, it's just not enough time. And I was in a program that had 14 women in it. And when I went back a few years later to visit, they were at 32 women. And it's not that that's a lot, but when you have 32 women and one counselor, nobody's getting the one-on-one care they need to actually get better. And the program I was in consisted of like 4 12-step meetings a day. And then we did all kinds of we actually did a lot of cool stuff, a lot of women-oriented stuff. But it's still, for me, I could see how people get stuck in that cycle because 90 days isn't enough. I ended up in, it's like a halfway house. That's not what they call it, but it's like you're in a home with like 10 other people and you're sober, but it's sober living, but like you can basically do whatever you want. You just can't come home with drugs, basically. And, you know, I could see how easy it would be to, after 90 days, especially if you're not serious, to go back out and use because you still have a place to crash. You know, you're not getting the skills you're supposed to be getting. Transitional housing. Yes, transitional.
Yes, transitional. And I agree with you. We need quality long-term substance abuse and mental health treatment in this country. People don't understand. It's like, for those who don't get it, it's like, oh, just, if you have a problem, just go to treatment. A lot of people can't. They don't have access to it. And I will just
Or they
say,
have to wait and they die waiting.
yes, they die waiting for a bed. And in the next few years, I hope that things will change in this country, because when you cut millions and billions of dollars from a program that will literally help people with exactly what we're talking about, the results will be disastrous.
Right. And I think really it's going to be up to, here's the thing. If I had $1 billion, I wouldn't have $1 billion. And the reason I
Mhm.
wouldn't have $1 billion is because I would want to take $1 billion and create a program that helps people get better. You know how there's
Yeah.
like people who have money and they could be billionaires, but they're not because they put so much into philanthropy. Like that would be
Mhm.
me, because my passion, I would love to start a treatment. Like if I fucking hit the lottery tomorrow, I would buy a new house. But after I bought the new house, okay,
Yeah.
I would want to set up some sort of treatment program in my community.
Yep.
I'm in
I
a
would
rural
too.
community, and we are in the only county that does not have an actual detox or treatment center that is inpatient.
Oh,
If
wow.
anybody needs to detox or go to treatment, they get benzos to sleep until they can get moved to another county, and or they go
Oh
out of
my
state
God.
to Vegas. If they have Medicaid, they go out of state to Vegas because that's the next closest like major city. And in the year 2016, this is before things changed again with the law, but in the year 2016, our county, Mojave County, had more prescription narcotics than Maricopa County, which is Phoenix.
Oh my God.
And they had like 3 times the prescription rate for narcotics and no detox center. And of course they fixed that now because what the fudge, right? But why don't we have a detox center here? It
That's
just doesn't make sense to me. And it's like my dream would be to start a detox center. I wouldn't want to run it. I don't want that headache, but I would 100%
yeah.
fund it and let somebody else run it as a nonprofit. And I would want to do a 2-year program, and I would want to do programs that help people keep from getting incarcerated. And a few years ago, and I can't find the program now, so I don't know if it exists anymore, but there used to be a program in California, and it was a alternate program where you could go to jail or you could go to this treatment program for 2 years. And if you successfully completed the treatment program for 2 years, you could get your charges dismissed. And for 2 years, they gardened their own vegetables and fruit. They learned how to cook their own food. They did all the work in this community was done by people in the community, with the exception of things like counselor, case manager, stuff like that. And even then, they would give them the ability to, and it had a 97% success rate. 97% success rate. That is
That's incredible.
that's a 3% recidivism rate. We
Yeah.
we need that in this country, and we need it in more than just one place. And I don't know if they still exist. I can't even find the name of the program anymore because I wanted to write about it. And I was like, that makes sense. It's a self-sufficient community. You have your people that have been there for a while mentoring the new people. Now, they didn't accept people with certain types of charges, which I understand, because if you had an SO charge, it's a liability to have them in that community.
Yeah.
But you could start programs for those people, because a lot of
Yeah.
people, and I am not saying that S offenses are okay. Please do not get it twisted. But those people will be released into your community. So we need to have programs for them not to reoffend. So I'm not
Yeah.
opposed to having a community that caters to their needs, because a lot of times addiction is involved in that too. A lot of times they have some sort of untreated trauma that led to those problematic behaviors. Some people are just disgusting and should never get out of jail, like period. But if they're
Yeah.
going to be released into the community, you have to make sure that your community is safe, and they need to have skills. So I think like it would just be amazing if we had programs like that. But nobody benefits when people aren't sick. And that's the reality. I mean, it really comes back to what the Sacklers did. That nobody's making money if we're all sober and not needing their
Yeah.
medications.
And that's why they say, like, to choose like a field, because the old like adage or whatever, people will always be sick or crazy.
Right. 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 They filtered Erica's comment, but I think she meant to say these are conversations that need to be had, but it said conservatives, so it filtered her comment. I see it, Erica. I see what you're saying. She wasn't trying to be political, but I guess because I have political words filtered out so that they won't come through. So if you say something that looks political, it won't work. Because I don't want people jumping in my chat on a politics trip because this is not a politics channel. So I know what she meant, though. That's hilarious. So ultimately, I mean, stigma is part of the problem, but it's only part of the problem. It's not even, I mean, the biggest thing, especially with healthcare, just in general, is there's so many freaking variables. Where you live, how much money you have, what the politics are like in your state, what your health condition is, what your mental health condition is, what programs are available, what's funded, what's privately funded, what's a nonprofit, how much, and here in Arizona, and I am ashamed of the people who did this because this is how our field is represented so negatively. They had what we call a body broker system, and they would go to New Mexico and they would pick up Native Americans and they would bring them here for alcohol treatment. Well, because they have tribal health care. And they would tell the families that they were going to get them into treatment, and then they would drop them off on the street with a bottle, bill their Medicare, and then these people were just out in the street. And it was a huge fraud ring, and a lot of people went to jail for it. I don't know I actually was really embarrassed to find out that one of the doctors I used to work with at one of the places I used to work was involved in this scheme. And it's like, are you fucking kidding me? Oh, I'm not supposed to cuss because I have items on the slide. Sorry. But it was like, are you freaking kidding me right now? You're playing with people's lives, and and indigenous people especially don't make the news if they go missing or if they get murdered. We just had a 14-year-old that was horribly taken from the world here in Arizona because they already don't get attention, and it's awful. And think about, you're giving people that I don't know why the pinning isn't work. I've never been able to pin anybody, but you're giving people alcohol that are already at high risk for being a victim of crime because of their nationality, and it's disgusting.
Yes, it's a travesty what has happened to Indigenous people and all the missing Indigenous women that people don't even know about. And there was an excellent show on 2 years ago on ABC. It was canceled after one season. It was called Alaska Daily with Hilary Swank, and she worked at a newspaper that started talking about the disappearance of Indigenous women because no one was paying attention. It was such a good show. Oh my God, so
I'm gonna
well
have to
written,
find that show because it sounds
so
like
poignant. And unfortunately, it didn't make it past the first season. But that is absolutely something that is not talked about enough.
Yeah, and it's and I know that even in their own communities, there was actually a documentary here in Arizona about how even in Native American communities, the police don't even have the resources to investigate the murders that happen on or off the reservation. And they were trying to procure more funding. And I think our governor did sign for them to get more funding, but I don't, they're just, every time I see a missing person flyer for somebody, and it's not to say that all people don't deserve coverage, because everybody deserves coverage. But I also know that certain people get more coverage than other people. And so whenever I see somebody that is not white, not getting coverage, I will share and reshare and reshare and reshare till we get a status. Thank you, Andrew, so much. I appreciate you. Hey, this went longer than I thought it would. So I'm excited about that. Look at that, 25,000 likes. That is wild. You guys have been amazing. So I'll recap a few things and then I'll go ahead and wrap it up because my nose won't stop running and we've got this thunderstorm and I feel really gross now. But again, we're just gonna, basically, I just hopped on to do a live so we could talk about stigma and how it affects addiction and mental health and recovery and why people don't get help. And basically, to recap, this is what I would really like everybody who's here to take away from this discussion today. Stigma is real. Stigma makes it worse. Stigma keeps people from getting the help they need. And we need to do more to allow people to feel comfortable enough that they can come and ask for help. So instead of judgment, we need a little more acceptance, a little more, how can I help you? What can I do for you? Are there resources I can help them find? Things like that. And you don't have to do it yourself if you don't want to, but maybe you can reach out to somebody who might know more than you. Every one of us has the power to break stigma. Every one of us has the power to break generational cycles, and how we treat others is how we're going to impact them. So we want to make the biggest, most positive impact that we can in making sure that how we treat others is kind and compassionate, even if we might think they don't deserve it. We are all humans and we don't know everybody's story. So every one of us has the power to do something, say something, speak up, and be vocal. Now, before we wrap up, I always like to go through a couple of things. One is I am no longer a licensed therapist. This is just an open and honest discussion. It's not to be substituted for therapy. And if you or someone you know is in crisis, you can dial 988 if you're in the US or Canada, or you can text HOME to 741-741. If you are outside of the US, you can go to findahelpline.com, findahelpline.com. Thank you guys all for hanging out with me and listening to me talk. This is really awesome. This went for an hour and a half. And I appreciate each and every one of you who liked, gifted, participated, listened. Every single one of you means a lot to me, and we will do this again. I will be live again for sure on Sunday at 4:30 p.m. Arizona time. And maybe I'll pop up again tomorrow since this went so well. You guys are awesome. Thank you.